Hey guys, welcome back to Honeycomb. My name is Keo Kosho. Today we're going to be talking about these metal cone brewers that we got from Kinto. Now, if you are enjoying our content, please do subscribe. It does mean a lot to us and it does go a long way when you click that subscribe button. And follow along on Instagram. I'm at Keo Kosho on Instagram. Follow at Daily Drink Mag on Instagram. And follow at Honeycomb Manila, which is this place here, our collaborative studios in Double Dragon Plaza, Manila, Philippines. All right, so let's dive right into it and let's talk about these brewers here. As a disclaimer, I do want to say that these were sent to us as review units by the brand Kinto, Kinto Philippines. Kinto is a Japanese brand that's distributed here, and they were nice enough to send these over as loaners. We borrow them, we use them, we make our review, and we send them back. They have no editorial review over what we're gonna say. They don't know what we're gonna say, whether or not we're gonna like it. However, I will say that if we don't like a product, we don't slam it in a review. I just feel like that doesn't help that many people. Rather, okay, you'd probably be more likely to buy something if you knew what you're getting into and maybe if it answered your needs, rather than just saying that something's bad. So I tend to want to review and cover things that I think will be good, and that's sometimes why you see me unbox a product and then not post a review. Usually that's the case. Sometimes it takes me a while to figure it out or find my stride with a product. That's the case for these guys. So it's taken about 3 weeks before we really figured out what really works for them. And I'm going to share them with you today. So on the surface, these guys look very similar. The ways that they're similar are that they both have these metal filter cones. The main difference that you'll notice is that this one kind of has this dripper, and this is cool. You can stick a Kalita 155 filter, a wave filter into there, similar to the way you do with an Origami. And then that goes in there. And then this one just sits right in the lip of the carafe, and you can see that it makes a nice cone shape there, similar to the way that like a Chemex would. But unlike a Chemex, the surface of the filter doesn't make contact with the surface of the glass. So the water and the coffee just flows right through there. Now, to account for that there's no flow control around that cone, the holes in this filter are slightly smaller. I'm gonna hold this right up to the camera. And you can see just how fine those holes are. And you can see some of the oil seasoning. Now compare that to the cone here of the Carat brewer. You can see that the holes on this one are much bigger, and that's for good reason. The Carat brewer has this device here, the little dripper thing, and it has a hole which controls the flow of the water as it goes through the coffee maker or the brewing device. So in general, they actually have very similar flow rates. At this point, it really becomes just a matter of choice of which one works better for you. But I will say that in terms of utility, in terms of beauty, I think that the Carat looks slightly better. It is an elevated taste. This little metal ring does add a lot to the design. But in terms of flexibility, I found that the carafe was a lot more useful because you could use it for this cone. Unlike a Chemex, you can't put a paper filter right inside, but you can pop in other brewers. So here we have the Origami Smooth, I think this one is, or is it Mellow? I can never remember. But you can see it fits really nicely inside of the brewer. And that makes it very useful for using with other brewers as well. Another example here is the Origami, and that shoots right in as well. And unlike a ring on an Origami brewer, this one kind of self-levels. It kind of finds the right position for it, and that works really well for putting in a Kalita 185 wave filter into here, or even a Origami or any other paper filter. A V60 filter would work in this as well. While we have the Origami here, this is one of our newer Origamis that we purchased recently. And I did want to point out, because there are people who have been asking me this on Instagram and DMs, that their Origami came with a sticker that said Origami Japan, and this one has it printed on the inside. I think that's silk screened there into the ceramic. And it's under this matte glaze. This is the new batch of origami is now available with El Capitan. And this matte glaze covers up that logo and it seals it on the inside. And the reason why Origami did this apparently was because of the rate of piracy that a lot of people were knocking off and making fake origami brewers. And I also noticed that, you'll see broken origami brewers, like people posting them online on Twitter and Facebook groups that, oh no, my origami broke. And then you see the way that it shattered, the kind of ceramic that's used, and you can tell it's not a real origami. So I, knock on wood, have not broken an origami yet. And I think that maybe that's because, I get the real McCoy. And I think they're just better made. Like, you can imagine how much effort will be put in by the person who actually made and designed the product versus someone who's just trying to copy it. I think trying to get it right is worth more to those people. So yeah, just a little side note about the Origami Brewer and the new color that we got. We actually got 3 new colors. So let me know in the comments if you actually want to see all 3 colors that we got of the new batch of Origami Brewers. So now we have 4. The pink one you've seen before. This is a light blue one. It's like a matte blue. All right, so yeah, that's another thing I like about this carafe is that you can use it for other brew styles, not just for the cone that comes with it, but also for using with other drippers. But also, I also used this just yesterday to make a Japanese ice bath, and it worked out really well. Sitting nicely inside of the bowl, it wasn't rocking around. It had enough weight, and then stirring around, it conducted the temperature really effectively and allowed the coffee to cool down relatively quickly because it is borosilicate glass. It does feel very sturdy, but it does have a nice thinness to it, unlike a Chemex, which is very, very thick. So I do like this. I do prefer this over a Chemex for the ice brew method. Now, something that the Chemex does really well is putting ice in the bottom and having a very hot top and a cold bottom. This one didn't do that as well, but now that I don't do those flash brews so often and I lean towards the Japanese ice bath method. If you haven't seen that before, I'll link a video to that. So this worked really well for that. This one was just okay for Japanese ice bath method. The problem was that the mouth is kind of small, so it's hard to spin stuff in there. Now, it should be said that you could, in theory, use this as a dripper as well for these guys. The strange thing is that these products do work so well with other drippers, but like if I tried to brew this here, coffee would leak all around the outsides. That's kind of a bummer. Like you kind of wish that all of these worked in the same system, but they just don't. All right, so that's kind of an introduction to the brewers. This has this nice little seat that you can put it in, made of plastic. And but the real question is, how do they brew and how do you brew well with them? Generally speaking, they kind of have similar results. You do use the same very coarsely ground coffee with them, and I've ground some coffee here so that you can see the texture of the grinds that we use in here. Very, very coarse. And with most grinders, when you get this coarse, you end up having quite a bit of fines inside of your grinds. So the problem with that is when you're brewing with a metal filter, a lot of those fines make their way into the coffee, which is why a lot of people sift their coffee. Now, if you've watched the channel for a while, you know that I don't sift coffee, at least not very often. I don't own a Kruv. A lot of people own those. I don't really believe in the system of sifting coffee, mainly because, what do you do with all that excess coffee? I feel like it's a bit wasteful. Also, the method of sifting coffee to kind of determine particle size doesn't really account for the fact that the surface area on each of those grounds, each of those different grind sizes, I should say, are different, right? So if you had an equal weight of fines and boulders, so, bigger pieces and smaller pieces, it's very possible that the surface area of the fines will be more because it's cut up into smaller pieces. So, that creates a problem as well. And it's one of the reasons why I'm not such a big believer in sifting of coffee. That said, we're gonna do some sifting right now. And there's a good reason why. Now, I do this with both these brewers, but today we're going to demonstrate it specifically on the Carat brewer because it's a little bit faster with these bigger holes. Now, why are we going to sift? Well, when you brew with a metal filter, there's a tendency for a lot of the fines that are inside of your grounds to end up in the bottom of your brew. And that's not pleasant, to get coffee jamming up inside of your taste buds and preventing you from tasting the coffee. But the second thing is that it also wastes coffee as well. So if I was going to brew that and all of the fines would make their way into the bottom of the brew, I wouldn't drink that coffee either because it's full of fines. It's already muddy. So removing the fines before you brew the coffee actually allows you to save coffee in the long run. So I got a bowl here and I'm just gonna dump this coffee. This is about 21 grams of coffee into the filter. So first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna tear the filter so that I know how much coffee we put inside. And here we have 21.2 grams of coffee. Now I'm just gonna sift the coffee using the filter itself by tapping it. And you can see immediately that there's already a good amount of fines that have come out just from those few taps that we made. And we're gonna keep doing this, and I estimate that I can get about 5% of the fines out of this coffee just by tapping. And then hopefully when we put it back here, it's gonna be at about 20 grams. Now that's gonna take a while, so we're gonna cut to that. You're gonna see a little bit of me tapping, and then we're gonna cut to when this is done, and I'll show you how much coffee we got out of this. Okay. So I'm just going to wipe down the outside of that cone, and you can see almost immediately just how much less fines there are in that coffee. And on the scale, you can see 20.3 grams, which means that we removed about 5% of the fines, and here they are inside of this here bowl. Those are all the fines that we got out. So when you're grinding coffee, generally speaking, you want all of your coffee to be about the same grind size, right? Around the particle size, you want it to be about the same so that they all extract at more or less the same rate. I don't like sifting because I feel like I want to use that coffee, especially with a paper filter. I feel like they also bring their own flavors and make for interesting brews of coffee. And appreciating different grinders is also appreciating the fines that they create. However, with a cone filter, as I said earlier, with a metal filter, you're gonna be wasting that coffee anyway. The other thing is that if you sift using the metal filter itself, you're only removing the particles that are gonna make their way out anyway, right? Unlike with using a sift or a Cruve, that kind of device, you're kind of guessing what's gonna stay inside and what's not. This one, you're getting a 1:1 example of how much is gonna come out. Now, we said earlier that the holes on this are bigger than the ones on this. And, it's actually the same. Like if you sift out the grounds, you end up with a lot less fines. It's very efficient in getting the exact size that you want in terms of the maximum size of grounds. Now, some coffee will still make it into here, but we've kind of minimized that. And once we add water, these particles, these coffee grounds will actually expand to be bigger than the hole. So hopefully you'll see that we did a good job of sifting that out. All right, I'm gonna put this over to the side. Now we have 20.3 grams of coffee. We're gonna brew it here inside our Carat brewer at about a 15:1 ratio. So I have our coffee water heated up to 100 degrees Celsius. I'm gonna stand up to brew this coffee because this guy is pretty tall. Our 20 grams of coffee, we're now gonna match with 300 grams of hot water at 100 degrees fresh off the boil. And the first step we're gonna do is we're gonna do a bloom of about 20 grams of water at first. Now, why not more? Sometimes blooms are bigger and you go all the way to 30 ml, well, the holes, as we mentioned, on this filter are larger than on a paper filter. So it's not going to do as good a job of holding in. And you can see right away, it's not doing as well a job of holding in the liquid as it drips down towards the carafe. Now 30 seconds, I'm going to go all the way up to 150 grams of water, which is 50% of our total brew weight. We're brewing with 300 grams of water, which will give us a 15:1 ratio. Now you can see that the liquid is flowing almost instantaneously through these very coarse coffee grounds down into the jug. All right, so we've got to 150 grams. I'm gonna wait until this gets to about 2 minutes, and then I'm gonna pour the rest of our coffee. The reason why is because I wanna make sure that there's enough time for this coffee to really fully develop, and now that we have the flavors that we want, we just wanna be able to expand on them later on in the brew. All right, coming up on 2 minutes, and now I'm gonna pour a lot of that water in right away. And what I'm trying to do is kind of trying to maintain the same bed level inside of my brewer so that the ratio of water to coffee kind of stays the same throughout the brew. And when you get to 300, we're just gonna pull out and stop. And that's it. 2 minutes, 30 seconds to brew our coffee. And it's still dripping a little bit, but it's almost done actually. It is almost done brewing. Alright, so I'm gonna pull this off at 3 minutes to stop that continuous dripping. So there is some continuous dripping. You can see though, if I move the filter real quick, that dripper is empty. And it's 3 minutes, I'm just gonna take it off and put it over here on our cup. And you can see that the coffee is still a little bit murky. I don't know if you can see that in this camera. It's still a little bit murky, which means that some fines have made it into our carafe, into our jug. That's fine. We just want to wait a little bit before we pour it out. Usually I say when you're brewing with one of these, you wait maybe 5 minutes and let those fines settle all the way to the bottom. Now, luckily this jug has this nice little cover which can go right on top, and it's going to keep it at a nice temperature for us to drink a little bit later on. So we're going to cut the head right now, 5 minutes later. All right, so it's been about 5 minutes since we finished our brew, and I just want to do a quick recap. We did a 1:15 ratio with a very coarse grind. This was ground on the Breville Smart Grinder all the way at percolator levels, which is 60. So that's the maximum for that grinder, and it does make a nice, very coarse grind. As you can see, we got a really nice consistent flow rate for the coffee that we brewed today. We removed the fines. There was about 5% fines in our coffee, and we just did it by, with some tapping. That was about maybe 5 minutes of tapping to remove 1 gram of coffee from our, from our total amount of coffee. That left us with 20 grams of coffee. Times 15 is 300. So we split that into 2. We did our bloom. After our bloom, we brought it all the way up to 150. From 150, we waited until we got to 2 minutes, and then we poured the rest until we got to our target weight of 300 ml. So now we are coming up on about 10 minutes from the start of our brew time, minus the 3 minutes of brew. It's about 7 minutes waiting, and that should be pretty close to being ready to drink. I'm gonna take a peek. You can only expect it to be so clear when you're dealing with these coffees, right? When you're pouring, pour at this angle so that only the top of your coffee comes out of the carafe. You can see that it's a relatively clear cup for a metal filter, And there's a nice layer of oil over the top, which is quite indicative of metal filters. There's no paper to absorb these oils. So you are getting that extra level of experience, of body from the coffee. Full bodied, clear, balanced, and no fines in this first sip. Not sure how that will be in the second or third cup. Traditionally, with a paper filter or with a metal filter, you still end up not drinking maybe the last 1 cm in your cup. And with this sifting pattern, maybe we brought that down to about half. And then you can see just the little bit of grounds that we have left inside of the carafe. That is significant. That is a lot less. If we did not sift all of these out, they would end up in there. So just imagine how much more coffee we would have needed to leave inside of this jug. Concerns. Well, when you're using a metal filter, it does become quite an ordeal to clean these. Usually what I do is that I wash it, and then, what we can remove, we remove, but most of it goes down the sink. And then there's a lot of oil and minerals that make it into the jug, into the carafe for both of these guys. So you might notice that there's quite a lot of water stain that builds up on these guys because we use them with metal filters. That might be a concern, but if you want a metal filter taste, these are great choices. My personal preference, it's tough. I like this guy because the carafe is pretty nice, and because the filter itself has the bigger holes and makes it a bit easier to sift. But for utility, as I mentioned earlier, the shape of this one, the thinness is also very nice and very, very useful. So yeah, it could go either way. Do we like the products? Yes, we like the products. They are useful as maybe a third or fourth product in your arsenal, in kind of your brew kit. If you want to experiment and get some more experience with different brewers, this is a good way to go. They would not be my first choice for brewing with filters, but in terms of what's available in the Philippine market, these are super solid options, and maybe even the first options I would go to in terms of getting a metal filter for brewing coffee. There's a filter that I use called the Kawava cone filter, which was one of the very first metal filters designed for the Chemex. And I really like that, but it's just not really that available here in the Philippines. Do these brew as well? They brew pretty close. I gotta say, they do brew pretty close, especially this one. So you could probably pop this into a Chemex as well. You could also let this sit inside any other dripper and have a metal filter experience, and that would be cool as well. All right, so that's it. That's kind of my really complicated way to make coffee without using a paper filter. The sifting, I promise you, it's a game changer. I don't generally believe in sifting, but in this case, because it is a one-to-one use case for these particular filters, I gotta say, it's a good idea. And if you have one of these, you should absolutely do it when making your coffee, and it will save you from having to waste coffee as well. All right, do you have any questions? Do you have any thoughts about these brewers? I would like to know. Please do leave a comment down below, or even if you don't have any thoughts, just leave a comment, leave an emoji of a coffee, or tell us what your favorite coffee or favorite brewer is. That goes a long way for us, it really does. You've made it this far in this video, you might as well do that extra step for us and click subscribe if you haven't yet. Please do watch another one of our videos, and I wish you guys good luck, I wish you guys good health, I wish you guys great coffee. Peace.